The F-117 was the first warplane to be specifically designed from the outset for low radar observability. The Lockheed Advanced Development Company, better known as the Skunk Works, began working on stealth as far back as the late 1950s. During 1975, Skunk Work engineers began on an aircraft which would have a greatly reduced radar cross-section that would make it all but invisible to enemy radars. The technique that they came up with was known as faceting, in which the ordinarily smooth surface of the airframe is broken up into a series of trapezoidal or triangular flat surfaces, arranged in such a way that the vast majority of the radar incident on the aircraft from a source will be scattered away from the aircraft at odd angles, leaving very little to be reflected directly back into the receiver. An additional reduction in radar cross-section was to be obtained by covering the entire surface of the aircraft with radar-absorbent material, RAM. One of the disadvantages involved in the use of faceting on aerodynamic surfaces was that it tended to produce an aircraft which was inherently unstable about all three axes, pitch, roll, and yaw. The cockpit of the F-117 is covered by a large and heavy hood-like canopy with 5 separate flat transparencies, 1 on either side and 3 in front. The visibility from the cockpit is rather limited upward, downward, and to the rear. The canopy opens to the rear and has serrated edges in order to limit the radar reflectivity of the joint between canopy and fuselage. The 5 flat transparent panels are specially treated to further reduce the aircraft's radar visibility. The F-117 is unstable about all 3 axes and requires a fly-by-wire system in order to be able to fly at all. The fly-by-wire system is similar to that in the F-16 and is quadruply redundant. There are 4 independent channels which each control the same function. The signals from each of the channels are constantly being compared with each other, and if one signal is found to differ from the other 3, its channel is assumed to have failed and is automatically shut down. In the unlikely event that all 4 channels manage to fail at the same time, the aircraft cannot be flown and the pilot would be forced to eject. Upon such a failure, the stealth will start to wobble like a badly tossed football and tumble out of the sky. During the production run of the F-117, the 2 metallic all-moving tail fins were replaced with ones made of graphite thermoplastic materials. This change resulted from the loss of 1 fin and rudder from an F-117 in 1987 during a test flight. However, the aircraft landed safely despite the loss of the fin. The retrofit program was interrupted by Persian Gulf deployment, so most of the F-117s deployed to Saudi Arabia had the original metallic tail fins. With the fly-by-wire system working, the aircraft is highly maneuverable and a dream to fly. On enemy radar, she reads like a flock of birds. Steady and straight, the pilot could safely drink hot coffee out of a full cup, if he could have it. Of course, the F-117 is air refuelable. Most of the Air Force fleet is these days. An in-flight refueling receptacle is added behind the pilot's cockpit. A small light is mounted near the receptacle to guide the refueling boom operator in nighttime refueling operations. Mid-air refueling is one of the more difficult aspects of F-117 flight, since most of the time it is done at night, and the F-117's pilot upward vision is blocked by the canopy so that he cannot actually see the boom of the refueling aircraft. On December 19, 1989, just 13 months after the Pentagon had disclosed the existence of the F-117, it was used in combat for the first time. This was in Operation Just Cause, the invasion of Panama, intended to dislodge and arrest General Manuel Noriega. At the beginning of the invasion, 6 F-117s flew to Panama from Tonopah. Their mission was to drop 2,000-pound bombs near the Panama Defense Forces barracks at Rio Hato. The purpose of these bomb drops was to stun and disorient the PDF troops living there so that the barracks could be stormed and the troops captured with minimal resistance and casualties. The pilots were instructed to drop their bombs no closer than 50 meters from 2 separate PDF barracks buildings. On the night of December 19th, 2 lead F-117s each dropped a conventional 2,000-pound bomb at the Rio Hato barracks. The bombing attack seems to have achieved its goal, since the barracks were quickly taken with minimal resistance. However, it was revealed 3 months later that one of the bombs had missed its target by a considerable amount. It seems there had been some miscommunication in the final stages of the mission planning, and the pilot had been given the wrong coordinates for the target. The media jumped on this event and concluded that the F-117 had been a failure on its first mission. There are always those in the media who see controversy in expensive programs for the military and play it up. There are also those, and not just in the media, who question the need for an airplane like the F-117, especially since its role in combat is so limited, and the ship is subsonic in an age of fighters and fighter bombers that can do Mach 2 or better. The F-117's sole weapon is a stealthy, near-invisible approach, and its mission is to attack with complete surprise. Once the battle is joined, it is almost impossible to get a lock on it from the ground, and the ship flies and fights only at night. Flying by day completely obviates all its advantages, and under such circumstances would be extremely vulnerable to the meanest and greenest of enemy fighters or fighter pilots. The F-117 Nighthawk flies and fights with PGMs, or precision-guided munitions. Its targeting systems are so advanced they are not just tasked with hitting a particular building or installation, but with a specific part of it. Landing is a snap with fly-by-wire. Vectoring and glide path is handled by the computer. On a short runway, the F-117 Stealth needs a parachute in order not to overshoot its landing parameters. It was to be in Operation Desert Storm that the F-117 was to prove its mettle. In response to the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait on August 2, 1990, the F-117 was deployed to Saudi Arabia on August 19, 1990. In spite of the massive coalition buildup, President Saddam Hussein of Iraq stubbornly refused to withdraw his troops from Kuwait. On January 17, 1991, the coalition began an air offensive to oust him from the neighboring sheikdom. The buildup of ground forces had commenced with Operation Desert Shield. Over 500,000 troops, mostly from the United States, would take part in both operations. Combat air patrols commenced almost immediately, with members of the coalition providing over 3,000 aircraft of every conceivable type. 6 carriers waited in the nearby Persian Gulf and Red Sea. Air crews and pilots came together from very diverse cultures for the effort. F-15s, 16s, E-3 AEWs, and the versatile A-10 Warthog tank buster all were there in force as well. Airplanes at bases in the region were staggered in their parking in case of Scud or enemy fighter attack. Carrier-borne Prowlers, an airplane based upon the old Intruder, would provide electronic warfare capabilities to the force. In overall command of the entire operation was General Norman Schwarzkopf. His officers called him Stormin' Norman because he suffered fools and errors in judgment badly. He had a specific plan for beating the Iraqis, and air power was to play the most important part. In the early morning hours, the F-117s of the 37th Tactical Fighter Wing initiated the air war against Iraq. Mission planners had assigned critical strategic Iraqi command and control installations to the F-117, counting on the aircraft's ability to hit precisely at well-defended targets without being seen. F-111Bs were also tasked on this night of the opening of hostilities. Other vital targets included key communication centers, research and development facilities for nuclear and chemical weapons, plus hardened aircraft shelters on Iraqi airfields, as well as planes left out in the open. On the first night of the war, an F-117 dropped a 2,000-pound laser-guided GBU-27 Paveway 3 bomb right through the roof of the General Communications Building in downtown Baghdad. In another attack on the communications building next to the Tigris River, another paveway was dropped through an air shaft in the center of the roof atop the building and blew out all four walls. During the first 3 weeks of the air offensive, F-117s obliterated many hardened targets with unprecedented precision. The 37th Tactical Fighter Wing flew 1,271 combat sorties and maintained an 85.5% mission-capable rate. The 43 F-117s of the 37th dropped more than 2,000 tons of precision ordnance and attacked some 40% of the high-value targets that were struck by the coalition forces. Not one F-117 was hit, shot down, or lost to mechanical failure. There is no evidence that the F-117 was ever detected or tracked by Iraqi radar installations, either ground or airborne. The F-117's concealment, deception, and evasiveness proved that it could survive in the most hostile of environments, and its laser-guided bombs struck with extreme accuracy. U.S. ground forces included many women in support roles, and some came under hostile fire. Most of the F-117s deployed to Saudi Arabia returned home to Nellis Air Force Base in April of 1991. The ongoing tension in the Middle East has seen the F-117 stationed in the region repeatedly. Its mission, like in the Gulf War, was to strike first at enemy aircraft positions to clear the way for conventional fighters. Rising into the air like a vampire with the last rays of the sun, the Nighthawk has proven itself a formidable asset under combat conditions. The F-117 has no air-to-air capability, or at least none that has been announced to the general public. It has no radar, does not carry an internal cannon, and is not equipped to carry or launch air-to-air missiles. The F-117 cannot rely on radar for navigation, weapons aiming, or weapons delivery because the transmission of a radar signal would tend to give away the location of the aircraft and hence defeat the whole purpose of stealth. For low-level navigation and weapons aiming purposes, the F-117 aircraft is provided with forward-looking infrared, FLIR, and downward-looking infrared, DLIR systems. The FLIR is mounted in a recess just ahead of the cockpit front windshield. It is located in a steerable turret containing a dual field of view sensor. When the FLIR is not in use, it is rotated 180 degrees to keep debris from damaging the sensor. The DLIR system is located in a recess underneath the forward fuselage and to the right of the nose landing gear well. Both the FLIR and the DLIR recesses are covered by a RAM mesh screen to prevent unwanted radar reflections from the active elements, and the edges of the recesses are serrated, with the fasteners being covered with RAM putty. The DLIR is provided with a bore-sighted laser for illuminating the target for attack by laser-guided weapons. Together, these systems form the Infrared Acquisition and Designation System, IRADS. The laser is slave to the IRADS and is an integral part of the infrared system. The spot size of the laser on the ground is about 12 to 18 inches, and the spot is stabilized in position by the IRADS. A highly accurate inertial navigation system, INS, backs up the sensors. This system uses an electrostatically suspended gyro as the primary means of guidance. The INS guides the aircraft to the immediate target area and points the FLIR's wide-angle field of view toward the general location of the target. As the aircraft approaches the target, the pilot monitors the view presented by the FLIR on the heads-up display screen. When the specific target is identified, the pilot switches to the narrow view on the FLIR and locks the screen of the display onto the target. As the target disappears underneath the aircraft, control is handed over to the DLIR, which acquires the target then and continues to track it. When the pilot decides to attack, he releases a laser-guided paveway bomb. Approximately 7 to 10 seconds before bomb impact, the DLIR's laser is turned on and illuminates the target, and the bomb homes onto the reflected infrared laser light reflected from the target. Videotapes from the FLIR-DLIR displays that have been released to the public by the DoD have shown that the F-117 flying during a clear night can hit a target only 1 meter in size from an altitude of 25,000 feet. A parachute braking system is provided since the lack of flaps makes the landing speed quite high, 160 knots, or almost 200 miles an hour. The braking parachute is housed behind split doors atop the rear fuselage. The braking chute is deployed as soon as the nose wheel makes contact with the runway. The parachute can also double as an emergency anti-spin device if needed. The windshield is coated with a special gold film layer to prevent the pilot's helmet from being detected by radar. This was found to be an important problem during early tests. The pilot sits on a McDonnell Douglas Aces II ejector seat, the same type of seat that is fitted to the F-15. The cockpit is large and roomy, even if the airplane's sightlines are not the best. Just about every opening hatch on this aircraft is serrated to further break up a radar reflection. Maintenance is constant and ongoing. Since external hardpoints for bombs or fuel tanks are taboo for a stealth attack aircraft, all stores must be carried internally. The weapons bay is located in the belly on the center line. It has 2 wells, each covered by an inboard opening door. The weapons bay can accommodate up to 5,000 pounds of ordnance, 2,500 pounds in each well. The crews are not above taking memorabilia photos of their work during Desert Storm. It will be something to tell the children and grandchildren about in years to come. 2 laser-guided Mk-84 2,000-pound bombs are included in the bomb bay ordnance packages, as well as other types of precision-guided munitions, including a panoply of paveway weapons in varying poundages. The mounting systems for these weapons are very complex, and great care must be taken with individual weapons as they are hooked into the weapon's electronic grid and fire control system. If one of these should hang up in the bomb bay, it could jeopardize the mission, the aircraft, and the pilot. Generally speaking, United States Air Force, Marine, and Navy maintenance crews are the best in the world and receive intensive training in all aspects of the work they must do. They know the pilot is up there, hanging in the air on the strength and quality of their efforts. Individual pilots, quite understandably, have a high degree of respect for their support crews, who tend to think of their individual aircraft as their own personal property, which they occasionally lend to the pilot. He is frequently admonished to bring it back without any holes in it. The F-117 Nighthawk looks like it's moving even when standing still. A traditionally trained seat-of-the-pants pilot has some difficulty early on with fly-by-wire simply because so much of his usual work is done for him by the onboard system. Although the F-117's role was initially viewed as limited to its special talents, it is now being considered for more expanded uses, partly to quiet its critics. The GBU-24 Paveway 3 is a more advanced version of the Paveway 2 with a larger tail surface and more efficient guidance system, which permits it to be used at lower altitudes and at greater distances from the target. This gives the Nighthawk still more of an advantage in its primary role of fomenting surprise. Although the F-117 has been called Frisbee, Nighthawk, and Wobblin' Goblin, there is no official name for it. Pilots often call the F-117 simply the Black Jet.
In our current tasking, we are exercising a wide spectrum of missions which the F-117 can be tasked for. These range from counter-air targets, offensive counter-air, suppression of enemy air defenses, and of course air interdiction. Currently, our wing is tasked at approximately 34 sorties per night tasking. Our primary limitation with being able to support that level of tasking centers around not only the number of aircraft assigned, but the duration of our sorties. Based on our location, each sortie averages somewhere between 5.5 to 6.5 hours, and you consider the restrictions that we have to limit our operations north of the border to night only. As the days become shorter, of course, our sortie duration and our ability to turn and generate more sorties will be somewhat limited. However, not significantly. I'm talking onesies and twosies, and we should be able to sustain the high level of sortie activity I previously described for some time to come.
The F-117 is currently out of production, but the Senate Armed Services Committee expressed an interest in acquiring 24 additional F-117s. However, the Air Force claimed that the F-117 is now obsolete technology and that it did not need or want any more of them. The last production F-117 was delivered to the Air Force on July 12, 1990.